Well, good afternoon, everyone, and a very, very warm welcome to this webinar on Israel-Palestine, who still espouses the two-state solution. Why and what are alternative futures? I'm Christina Holtgren. I am Professor of Sociolinguistics and UKRI Future Leaders Fellow at the Open University, and I will be co-chairing this webinar with my colleague, Les Levidov, who is a Senior Research Fellow in Development Policy and Practice, also at the Open University. I'd like to start by apologising that one of our speakers, Adnan Al-Sabah, is unfortunately no longer able to give his talk, but we're very much hoping that he'll be able to join us for the discussion if he's able to make his way through London during rush hour in time. So before I hand over to my co-chair, I'd like to just briefly explain the background for these webinars. This is our third webinar in a series organised by the OU Palestine Solidarity Group. The group formed in November 2023, shortly after the OU had released a statement on the Israel-Hamas that uncritically reproduced the UK government's pro-Israel narrative on this issue. Unfortunately, many students and staff who sympathized with the Palestinian cause for justice came to us telling us that the statement had caused them to feel fearful and anxious about expressing their solidarity and talking about this issue, and that in some cases they'd even been actively deterred from doing so. We feel that this is a very dangerous path and that it is exactly in times of unfolding genocide that we have to speak out. Universities and academics in particular have a responsibility to step up to their legal duty to question and test established ideas or received wisdom as enshrined in the Statement of Principles on Academic Freedom. The wider political context, of course, is one where the UK government brands peaceful protests for Palestinian justice hate marches, and those of us who participate in them extremists. The official opposition has colluded with this hateful, anti-democratic agenda. Webinars therefore aim to showcase some of those voices that are currently marginalized and silenced in mainstream society, in line with the OU's proud mission of social justice. I'd like to highlight our code of conduct. Because this topic is contested, we urge everyone to bear in mind that language too is contested. We ask everyone to use respectful and tolerant language. We will not accept any form of discrimination or harassment, whether based on race, gender, sex, sexual orientation, beliefs, age, disability, religion, or lack thereof, or socioeconomic background. We encourage anyone who has experienced or witnessed any form of discrimination or harassment during this webinar to alert us. In terms of housekeeping, we've muted everybody's microphone and switched off the cameras, and this is not because we don't want to see you, but simply to avoid distractions. We've also disabled the chat, so to ask a question, please go to the right-hand side of the MS Teams interface and choose Ask a Question from the drop-down list. You can like other people's questions too, if you'd like them answered. Our speakers will speak for approximately 15 minutes each, and speakers, please could I remind you to stick to your time slot so we have time for a question and answer session at the end. And we will be recording this session. So I'll hand over now to my colleague and co-chair, Les Levidov, to set up the topic. Over to you, Les.
Okay, thanks. Well, here I will elaborate a little on the publicity text that we circulated. As a context for this webinar, Western politicians have recurrently espoused the two-state solution since the 1967 Israeli occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, and especially now again during Israel's genocide there. So what does this two-state proposal mean to its diverse advocates? How has its meaning changed? Where did it come from? Well, let's go back to 1968, when the Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO, published a charter advocating a single democratic state with equal rights for everyone in all of historic Palestine. This aligned with anti-colonial movements worldwide, which were likewise seeking freedom from colonial rule. It understood Israel as a settler-colonial regime, which would perpetually endanger Palestinian freedom, rights, and welfare. This perspective was abandoned, or softened at least, in the late 1980s. Then the PLO envisaged an independent Palestinian state with its own vibrant economy and military force to protect its borders from Israel. However, since then, such a potential future has been rendered ever more unfeasible and implausible. Israel has continuously extended its settler-colonial regime by expanding its illegal settlements, displacing Palestinians, stealing their water, and constraining their economy. Israel has been more explicitly fulfilling the 1997 election manifesto of Netanyahu's Likud party, which said, "From the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, there shall be Jewish sovereignty." Indeed, historic Palestine, also known as the British Mandate Palestine, has become a single entity for Jewish Israelis, gradually fulfilling the ambition for a greater Israel throughout historic Palestine. This originated in the 19th century Zionist movement, which modeled itself on the white supremacist European settler-colonial projects in North America, South Africa, and Australia. A key turning point has been the 2022 general election, resulting in a government making more explicit those long-time aims. Just as an example, a year beforehand, one of the new ministers, Bezalel Smotrich, leader of the religious Zionist party, told Arab deputies in the Knesset, quote, "It's a mistake that Ben-Gurion didn't finish the job and throw you out in 1948, you meaning your ancestors." Well, better late than never, as we now see in the West Bank and Gaza. Israel's colonization agenda has received military, economic, and political support from Western governments. This support has continued through today, facilitating the genocide in Gaza and pogroms in the West Bank. All these changes have precluded an independent Palestinian state, which would be an essential component of any authentic two-state solution. So let's return to our questions for the webinar. Despite that political reality, who still espouses the two-state solution? Why do Western politicians still use that phrase? What do they mean by a Palestinian state? And going beyond their narratives, what are possible alternative futures for Palestinian rights and freedom? Who would need to create such alternatives? So I conclude the introduction there. Back to Christina and the speakers.
Thank you very much, Les, for setting up the context or the topic for us so nicely. I'm delighted now to introduce our first speaker, Gilbert Ashkar, who is Professor of Development Studies and International Relations at SOAS, University of London. Before joining SOAS in 2007, Professor Ashkar taught and researched in various universities and research centres in Beirut, Berlin, and Paris. His most recent books include Perilous Power, The Middle East and US Foreign Policy, co-authored with Noam Chomsky, and The Arabs and the Holocaust, The Arab-Israeli War of Narratives, Marxism, Orientalism, Cosmopolitanism, and The People Want, a radical exploration of the Arab uprising and morbid symptoms relapsed in the Arab uprising. A very warm welcome to you, Professor Ashkar, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for organizing this. Just by way of advertisement, what you've probably read is before the publication of my latest book, which is called The New Cold War. It came out last year. Right. Well, in 15 minutes, how to speak of this, I'll be, of course, very schematic, trying to summarize a long story in those few minutes. Let me start by considering what happens when Israel invades the West Bank and Gaza, that is the rest of the Palestinian territory that was not occupied by the Zionist state at its birth in 1948. At that point, this perspective is something that was first discussed within the Israeli government. And quite soon after the occupation, the new occupation, 1967, quite soon after that, the mainstream Zionist movement of that time, which was led by the so-called Labor Party, this movement, conceived a plan for the West Bank in particular, which became known by the name of the minister in the cabinet who worked on it, was Yigal Allon. So it's known as the Allon Plan, which basically provided for the Israeli control, continuous and permanent control of strategic locations in the West Bank, including the Jordan Valley, and a return of the populated areas of the West Bank to Jordanian sovereignty. But that would be a Jordanian sovereignty in an environment which is under Israeli military and security control. That was the perspective that existed, and for quite long, actually. At the international level, the West Bank and Gaza were dealt with as territories to be returned to their status pre-1967, which means Jordanian control for the West Bank, Jordanian sovereignty over the West Bank, and Egyptian administrative control of the Gaza Strip. It might sound surprising maybe to some, but the first to come up with the idea of the Palestinian state were actually the PLO. It's the PLO and Fatah in the 70s, which started floating the idea of a Palestinian national authority in any piece, in any part of Palestine that could be liberated. And by that, everybody understood at the time that what was meant was the West Bank and Gaza, the newly occupied Palestinian territories, but they were, as we said, under Egyptian and Jordanian sovereignty. So that is the program that the PLO had in the started floating in the 70s, which of course clashed with the prospects as seen from the Jordanian monarchy, which and at that time in the 70s the relations had very sharply deteriorated between the PLO and the Jordanian monarchy after the massacre of Palestinians in Jordan and the expulsion of the PLO from that country in 1970-71. Things will change most radically after the first Palestinian Intifada. And that first Intifada, which was a massive movement, popular movement, and to this day, in my view, the peak in Palestinian struggle, the most important episode in the struggle of the Palestinians, that compelled practically the Jordanian monarchy to dissociate itself and to just relinquish its claims over the West Bank. And that opened the way for further international work on the perspective of a Palestinian state in the 1967 occupied territories. The PLO did one more step in this direction in '88 in basically accepting the framework of 67 versus 48. And that will pave the way to the Oslo Agreement, when the labor right for a short while came back to government in Israel. You know that since 1977, it's the Likud, that is the far right of the Zionist movement, that has been most of the time in government. The labor rights under Rabin and Peres engage in the secret Oslo negotiations with Yasser Arafat, which will lead to the Oslo Agreement of 1993, which was basically an implementation of the Allon plan. That is, Israel, there's nothing in the agreement about a full withdrawal of the Israeli army from the West Bank. What it only provides for is a redeployment of the Israeli army that is out of the populated area, which are Area A now. There have been a distinction of three areas in the West Bank, A, B, C. So Area A would be, was given to the control, was put under the control of the Palestinian Authority, formed on the basis of the Oslo Agreement. And Area C is under full Israeli control, and Area B falls somewhere between these two situations, but still under Israeli control. The Oslo Agreement, of course, was the beginning of something that, in the mind of the PLO leadership, would lead to this kind of state. They had the hope that the dynamics, the political dynamics, international intervention in this and all that would lead eventually to a full recovery of the West Bank and Gaza, and therefore the fulfillment of their dream of a Palestinian state, so-called independent Palestinian state, which would be therefore the state of Palestine. So that was the perspective. Of course, on the other hand, the far right, the Israeli far right, never subscribed really to this perspective that since the Allon plan, if you want, they were in favor of the full control of the West Bank and Gaza, actually, which they regarded as part of Eretz Israel, as part of the land of Israel, that through their ideological perspective should be fully under Israeli control, and with the hope that in one way or another there will be some possibility to get rid of the Palestinian population sooner or later of these population and of these territories. And the Israeli far right never relinquished that dream, that hope, even if the Likud, having been in government, could not very blatantly always express that. We have seen also the surge of of groups which are even further to the right than the Likud. So now you have a collection of fascists and neo-Nazis governing Israel, among whom many, of course, consider that a continuation of the Nakba, as was said very openly by some of them after October 7, that they would regard this as a very desirable goal. Now, when when October 7 happened and gave this opportunity for this Israeli cabinet, and with an enlarged national unity cabinet, war cabinet, to wage this ongoing genocidal war, it was clear that for a major part of the Israeli government, that was to be taken as an opportunity to implement phase one of Nakba of Nakba 2 or Nakba 2 in, prior to Nakba 3 in the West Bank, which would be laying full Israeli control, recovery of Gaza, which the Israeli army had evacuated in 2005. So reoccupy Gaza, but this time with a plan of full control, which materialized in the destruction, the full destruction of the enclave. The expulsion, to the south, the displacement to a small corner of southern Gaza of the vast majority of the population, and of course the killing of tens of thousands of people in this terrible and ongoing massacre. This plan was expressed quite early. There was a leak of a document from the Ministry of Intelligence, the Israeli Ministry of Intelligence, where the favored scenario for Gaza was exactly that: expel the population, let them go to Egypt or somewhere else. Empty the Gaza from the population and take it over. Period. Take it over forever. It becomes part of the Israeli state, with a view at formal annexation of that. The international, the United States and Western countries, and generally the international perspective, that includes even China and Russia on this, stick to the two-state solution. So stick to this project of a state, a so-called independent Palestinian state adjacent to the Israeli state. And hence you saw from early on after October 7, the development of some tensions between Netanyahu, who wouldn't at all commit to that, especially with he also depends on his own far right, and has proclaimed several times his full opposition to a Palestinian state. He says it almost every day, that he boasts about having prevented this, and asserts that he won't let this happen, except in such a description that no Palestinian could accept. And in the face of that, you have the United States and, as I said, generally the global community, if one could say, exerting pressure for giving back Gaza to a Palestinian authority, which would be, as Joe Biden called it, a revitalized Palestinian authority. So he meant some kind of changes in the PA, which has been, of course, very much discredited. So changes in that PA in order for it to take over the control of Gaza once the Israeli army decides that it has finished doing its job. Now, in fact, whatever state or whatever, entity they have in mind would at best, and we have to be clear about that, would at best be an extension to Gaza of what you have in the West Bank today. That is, the Israeli army will not withdraw from Gaza this time. You can be sure of that. They won't withdraw again from Gaza. They will keep in control at the very least of all strategic or strategic parts, or some kind of security belt within the territory, and more than that. So what we are contemplating here is the possibility of a reproduction of the zone A, B, C in Gaza, where you would have zones under full Israeli control, and one zone of, or actually 2 or 3 zones, because they would be divided by, and Israel is building roads already to control the territory. So you would have areas of Palestinian density, of Palestinian population, under the control of this so-called Palestinian Authority, which would be in Zone A, controlling Zone A in the West Bank and the equivalent of Zone A in Gaza, and they would call that a Palestinian state, which of course is just a completely rump state. It's quite less than a Bantustan. We have to be clear of the fact that what is contemplated is quite less than what the Bantustans were in South Africa in terms of sovereignty. A final point, because I ended, just to say that I believe that the solidarity movement abroad should be concerned in fighting for the Palestinians' right to self-determination. That is what the solidarity movement should be. It's fine to discuss one state, two state, or whatever it is, but I don't think it's up to the solidarity movement to decide on these issues. The key point is really we should fight for the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination, which is exactly what is excluded from the equation now by Netanyahu, by Joe Biden, as it is by Netanyahu, as it is by everyone. The Palestinians are not even given a voice. I mean, even not even the so-called Palestinian Authority are given a voice in the future of Gaza. It is decided behind their back by others. So this is what should be denounced and fought against. And beyond that, of course, it is up to the Palestinian movement to decide what they want. We have to of course, to support them in their struggle against the occupation of their land, against for the dismantlement of the settlements, for the dismantlement of the wall, and of course the liberation of prisoners, and all these traditional and classical demands of the Palestinian movement. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Professor Ashgar. That was a fascinating account of the political context and territorial issues, and your thoughts on Palestinian self-determination. So thank you very much for that. If you have any questions.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Chris, because there aren't any questions yet. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to encourage people then that in case you do have questions, then please do post them in the question Q&A space to the right of the interface, and we'll address them later on in the webinar. Okay, so I'm delighted now to introduce our second speaker, Jelf Halper, who is Professor of Anthropology and Director of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. He is also co-founder with Ilan Pappé and others of the One Democratic State campaign, and his books include War Against the People, Israel, the Palestinians and Global Pacification, and Decolonizing Israel, Liberating Palestine, Zionism, settler-colonialism, and the Case for One Democratic State. A warm welcome to you, Professor Halper, and over to you.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Gilbert, for preparing. I'm building really on what you're presenting. Before I begin, I just want to acknowledge, of course, the ongoing genocide in Gaza. Which, should be at the center of our attention. It's also important, discussions like we're having tonight, to keep focusing on the bigger picture and focusing on, what's happening in the other parts of Palestine and what's happening internationally in a political sense, but also as you ask, where are we going with all of this? Where, what is the way out? So at the same time, we have to sort of multitask. At the same time, we're focused on this horrific genocide happening in Gaza. We nevertheless, because we don't determine the agenda. Biden is already preparing a two-state plan to present. In other words, we have to also be sure that we're not left out of the bigger political process. I think Lena has the slides. If you want to put them up, I guess from my days as an active academic, it's harder for me to talk without a blackboard. So I'm putting up some slides. Just a few to sort of help illustrate what we're talking about, assuming that not everyone knows the lay of the land. This is a picture of the two-state solution. Well, we have to begin our analysis is with the fact that Zionism is a form of settler colonialism. Now, it's interesting that a concept like settler colonialism, which is super academic, has managed to break through into the popular discourse. It's used all the time. I'm hearing it, from every direction, which is great. On the other hand, it's not really used in, I don't want to say an academic way, but in the way that it should. It's used more as an accusation. Zionism is settler colonialism, period. And now we go on as if now we delegitimize Zionism. But settler colonialism means something. It's a very important and complex concept, but it means something. And in just a couple of words, what it means is, and Zionism is not the only, by far, settler colonial movement in the world. The United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Kenya. You might add maybe Eastern Europe, Tibet. I mean, there's a lot of places in the world that have experienced settler colonialism. But in the Zionist sense, it was an attempt to take over Palestine. In other words, a foreign population comes in, and as Gilbert has said, from Europe, with a very Eastern European ethno-national kind of nationalism. It's not the nationalism that you have in Western Europe, where you have a concept of a state and citizens. But Eastern Europe, until today, if you think of Orban in Hungary or Putin or Poland, there's the idea that of the nation state in the purest sense. Every nation has its territory. That territory is exclusive to it, and it has to be purified. And this was actually the basis of anti-Semitism and the pogroms in the Jews' experience, because they and the Roma were pretty much the only minorities that existed in Eastern Europe, and they were intolerable because you can't have a nation within a nation. So that Zionism brought this Eastern European ethno-nationalism with a religious dimension to it, the idea of an exclusive nation state to Palestine. Now, every settler colonial movement also invents a narrative about why that country, that targeted country, belongs to it. It usually has to do with religion. In our case, the Bible, of course. God gave this land to the Jews and so on. Every movement has its own story. And that was the exclusive story. This is our land. We were here. We were exiled by the Romans, which, by the way, is not true historically. And now we're coming back to reclaim our country. And the people living there, the Arabs, we don't dignify them with the term Palestinians. The Arabs are intruders. And so we're coming back to reclaim our country, the entire country, as Gilbert properly said, from the Mediterranean to the Jordan River. As a matter of fact, the Likud and Begin's party, that was the precursor of the Likud, the Herut party, if you look up today, Herut, H-E-R-U-T, you'll see their emblem is actually, Israel and the occupied historic Palestine plus Jordan, because they were Israelite tribes on the other side of the Jordan River as well. At any rate, The idea then was to come in and transform an Arab country into a Jewish country, to Judaize. That's a very important term that we don't use very often, to Judaize Palestine. In other words, to transform, like I said, an Arab country into a Jewish country entirely, not pieces of it. Now, in order to do that, of course, you have to displace the population. So in the Nakba in 1948, 85% of the Palestinians living in what became Israel, in the beige area, were driven out of the country. And in 67, you had the occupation. And today, of course, in Gaza, Israel is threatening to try to drive out or voluntarily transfer, as they say, 1 million or 2 million Palestinians out of Gaza. The point is you have to displace the population and take their land. Otherwise, there's no way in which you can transform an already populated country into your own country. So that elimination of the indigenous population and the exclusive claim and control and settlement of the entire country is built into Zionism. In other words, genocide, I would argue, is built into settler colonialism because it's the only way that you can take over a country. And of course, genocide has happened, I think, in almost in all the, in one form or another, in all the settler colonial projects all over the world. All right. Now, so what do you do with that then? Well, the only place Israel can go is apartheid, because it wants control of the entire country, but obviously it's not able to expel all the Palestinians. In fact, today there's a majority of Palestinians in the between the river and the sea, so that you have to have an apartheid solution. Now, because you don't want to say apartheid, the more easily sold concept is a two-state solution. So Les asked at the beginning, why are we still talking about a two-state solution? Everybody knows it's not real for two reasons. One is because it's the name you give to apartheid. So I'll talk about that in 1 second. You take the Bantustan that the Palestinians would be confined to and give it the name state, and now you have two states. The main reason, though, is that it's a great tool of conflict management. The international community does not want to resolve this conflict. And Gilbert mentioned even Russia and China are complicit in this two-state idea because you have to expend too much political capital, domestically, certainly for the United States, but also in terms of other relationships, in order to genuinely force Israel somehow back into the 1948 armistice lines. And that's simply, so the two-state solution is a great tool of conflict management. We keep saying, yes, we're for Palestinian rights, Palestinians should have their freedom, we have to negotiate, we want a solution to this, but you can keep it going forever. This interminable process of a two-state solution. So it's not real. But let's say it was real for 1 second. Let's say that the gray area here, which is the occupied territory, would generally be, what would have to happen for it to be a genuine state? And there are some arguments. It's not just, but we do have to remember, as Gilbert mentioned, the PLO did accept this in 1988. So, we can't completely ignore that. What would the conditions be that there would be a genuine two-state solution? Again, realizing that the fact that Israel's already on 78% of the country does not make it just. Well, you'd have to have then territorial contiguity. That's one of the first conditions of a Palestinian state. In other words, the West Bank would have to be a unit, as we see here, Gaza, a unit, and then, of course, it'd have to be a connection. Even Oslo saw this, they called it the safe passage between Gaza, an extraterritorial passage, whether a tunnel or a bridge or whatever, between Gaza and the West Bank. Israel says no. explicitly no territorial contiguity in a Palestinian state, and I'll come to that in a second. A Palestinian state would have to have control of its borders, right? In other words, the issue isn't territory. The issue is sovereignty, genuine sovereignty, and economic viability. So that you have to have control of your borders if you're going to be a sovereign country. Israel denies that. In fact, Israel will not even give the Palestinians control of the electromagnetic sphere, which is communications or the airspace. You'd have to have Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, as a part of the Palestinian state, not only for cultural and religious reasons, but also because this is tourism is one of the largest industries in Palestine. And this is the heart, this is a major world center for tourism. If you take that away from the Palestinians, as Israel has done, you really cut the economic heart out of any Palestinian state. So, it's possible that this could be viable if this was genuinely the two-state solution. Palestinian state would have a border with Jordan. It would have a seaport. It would have a border with Egypt, with Israel, of course. It would have Jerusalem. It would have territorial contiguity and so on. But that's not going to happen. Just show the next slide for a sec. I'm not in control of the slides. So this instead is what we have. This is what I call the matrix of control, because Israel's not stupid. Israel can analyze this as well as I can. And Israel can also say, well, these are the preconditions for a viable sovereign Palestinian state. Let's systematically eliminate, those conditions. Let's foreclose. And this is what Sharon did in 1977 when the Begin government was elected. And Sharon, who's this decorated general, what ministerial role did he take? The Minister of Agriculture. What? No, because that's the land. And he became the head of the Ministerial Committee on Settlements. And he was the architect of what I call the matrix of control. And he said in 1977, we have to create facts on the ground that preclude the possibility of any Palestinian state, even if someday there's an Israeli government that wants a Palestinian state, that agrees to it. And so really basically what's happened is, as Gilbert mentioned, you have areas A, B, and C, A being the darker brown, B being the lighter brown, and C, which is under Israeli control where the settlements are, is the gray area, 62% of the West Bank. So what Sharon did is he created what are called settlement blocks. We talk about settlements. We don't talk much about settlement blocks. Those are the pink areas. And look at them as a kind of an H with two bars. So you have one of the bars is on the western part of the West Bank, including Jerusalem. You see all the way down, controlling the western part of the West Bank. Another bar is the Jordan Valley to the east. There's a bar across at Ariel and another bar of Greater Jerusalem, Ma'ale Adumim, and that creates the Bantustan that I mentioned before. You have an island in the north, an island for Palestinians in the center, an island in the south, and then Gaza. And the matrix of control was exactly prepared in order to foreclose a Palestinian state. What you also have today, of course, you have 750,000 settlers in the occupied territory. East Jerusalem has been annexed to Israel, so that's not even negotiated. And you have this whole matrix of highways that incorporate Israel into the West Bank, into Israel proper. All right, I'm done with my time, I think. Give me one more minute, okay? In other words, what I'm saying is the two-state solution, we should stop talking about it because it's simply an apartheid. Can you put up the next slide for a second? You see, it's an apartheid state. This is the best case scenario where areas A and B and Gaza become kind of a Palestinian Bantustan, and then we'll call it a state. So Biden's plan that he's going to present any day now is really for a two-state apartheid system. You asked about the alternative. The next slide, and we'll talk about this in the questions and answers more. We're in favor. I mean, Gilbert is right. Abroad, I mean, you have to support the Palestinians in solidarity, but it's up to them to decide what the political program is. As an Israeli Jew, I'm in a sense a stakeholder. I can't determine for Palestinians what their liberation strategy and the elements of the liberation are, but this is a joint anti-colonial struggle. This isn't only a Palestinian struggle, it's a joint struggle of Palestinians and Israelis, and therefore as a stakeholder, I'm very involved in what's called the One Democratic State campaign, and we're arguing that you cannot be in a political struggle without an end game. There has to be an end game, and once we get a critical mass of Palestinians and some Israelis behind a one democratic state idea, then we can begin to mobilize all of you abroad. Until that time, you're right, you can't really take a stand. You can't advocate for one solution or the other. So we'll talk about this later if you want to, but these are some of the basic elements of our 10-point one democratic state campaign, and that's where we believe we should be going. I hope I stayed in the time.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you so much, Professor Halper, for that account of this two-state solution and your thoughts on it serving as an effective tool for conflict management. Just to remind everyone, we do have some questions, which is great. We're going to take some of them now, but please do post your questions in the Q&A space. So the chat has been disabled, so you can't post a question there, but you need to use the Q&A session or the Q&A channel.
Let me just clarify, it's right next to the icon for the chat. I've received email messages saying I can't find it. It's just next to the chat on the top. And in our last webinar, we had about the same number of people and about 40 questions. This time we only have 3, perhaps because people can't find it, but it's right there. So please use it.
Yeah. I'm going to take a question here. So it would be great. I suppose this is mostly for Professor Ashkar, but Professor Halper, feel free to join in as well. So it's about the criteria for self-determination. So the person asks, it would be great to hear more about what the criteria for self-determination are. For instance, how do we recognize it, and what specifically should we advocate for, or whose voices and visions should we amplify?
Do you want me to reply?
Please go ahead, Professor.
Right. Well, self-determination should be the ability for the Palestinians to freely, of course, express themselves and freely also define the options. You know, because if you are asked to choose between options upon which you have no control, that's not really self-determination. And the second point is that self-determination for the Palestinians should encompass all Palestinians. That is, Palestinians of, all those Palestinians wanting to join in this self-determination, because you can't impose that on those Palestinians who have Israeli citizenship, so they have the right to choose. But the Palestinians of the 67 territories, the Palestinians of the diaspora, and of course the Palestinians of the refugee camps in Jordan, in Syria and Lebanon, should be also involved in this self-determination. That would be a real self-determination for the Palestinians if as all this, this population could express itself freely in opting, in deciding, in voting for which option they prefer.
That's great. Thank you very much, Professor Ashkar. Les, do you want to?
Yeah, I'd like to just probe a comment from Jeff about how let's call it the two-state narrative, because it's not a solution, but call it something like that. Two-state narrative serves the role of conflict management. And I think both of you would have something to say about that, because Jibo recently wrote that this narrative provides an alibi. So perhaps you could elaborate, for what does it provide an alibi, and exactly how does it help to manage conflict, at least abroad, perhaps also in Palestine itself? So we think we need to understand, how does this work? What roles are played by the narrative? And before you go ahead, please, in case people haven't found it yet, again, the Q&A is just next to the chat, so please put your questions there.
Well, I would say that the Palestinian issue is not a major issue for anybody, not the United States, not Europe, not China, not Russia, and not the Arab world for the most part. That's not true of the peoples, but I'm talking about the governments. Making that sharp distinction. On the contrary, this book I wrote, War Against the People, really shows, in a sense, how Israel has inserted itself into the international on two levels. Firstly, into the international capitalist system. So as capitalism begins to close down and become exclusionary, it has to become more repressive. And Israel's specialty, unlike the Pentagon, is war against the people on the basis of the laboratory of the last century of fighting against the Palestinians. And the other level of that is political repression at home. So governments all over the world, use Israeli technologies repression, and certainly in the Arab world, that's true. And so Israel's made itself too useful to just to ignore, and the Palestinians really have no leverage. So basically, I think what the world would like, all the governments, is to normalize relations with Israel, take advantage of what Israel has to offer them, and somehow simply to quietize the Palestinian issue. In other words, nobody wants to expend the political capital and get into a head-on fight with Israel. Why would they do that, basically? To force Israel, what are you going to force Israel to take 750,000 settlers out of the West Bank and move them back into, it's just undoable. The facts on the ground are too much. And certainly that's true in the United States and Europe, where you don't want to be seen as anti-Semitic and going after Jews and so on. And so really where we are today, and I think this is the two-state apartheid idea of Biden, is basically, how do we quietize the Palestinians? In a sense, the balance is there has to be apartheid. There's no other way. But can we sweeten the pot a little bit? Can we give the Palestinians enough money? Can we get enough of a collaborationist regime of a Palestinian Authority? Can the Arab states do something in terms of trade enough to make the Bantustan attractive enough that Palestinians will agree? That's really I think what's what the game is here. And therefore, it continues to be conflict management. There is no interest, in my view, of almost any government in the world to genuinely resolve the Palestinian issue and deal with Palestinian national rights. That's the people. That's us that care about that. I don't believe that transactional governments really care, and that's part of our fight. We know where to go. We have the analysis. We have the political plans. We know. The problem is, how do you break through to governments for whom justice, human rights, international law, peace, self-determination just mean nothing? They don't count for anything. That's my take.
There, do you want to comment on that, or should I go ahead with the next?
No, but I've seen that the third speaker joined.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. But I'll just ask one more question from the column and then go on to Adnan. So I'll read out the question, but then I'll comment on it a little. To what extent do you think that a two-state solution agreement would then require the 48 Palestinians, that is those who gain Israeli citizenship, to be forcibly removed to the newly created Palestinian state? I mean, if such a scenario were to happen at all, and here's my, say, twist on that question. Given the statement I quoted from Smotrich, Ben-Gurion didn't finish the job in 48. Is there a prospect for forcible removal of even the citizens, regardless of a so-called political solution?
Yeah, you're asking me or Jeff or
either
or anyone. For the neo-Nazis, actually the expulsion of the 48 Palestinians would not be to another part of Palestine. It would be just out of Palestine, like the Palestinians. I mean, they want to expel the population of the 67 territories out of these territories. So why would they send there any Palestinians? Now, you are, of course, speaking with the assumption of a scenario where you have something like a rump Bantustan, so-called Palestinian state being created. That would mean that the prevailing force within Israel would not be the neo-Nazis, but these so-called centrists, who are actually very, very right-wing, but the like of Benny Gantz and the rest, and maybe a reconstructed Likud with Yoav Gallant at the head instead of Netanyahu. These guys would not engage into something like this because the presence of the 48, as long as they are under control and not regarded as constituting a threat to the Israeli state, I think are kind of, they are on the one hand kind of hostages, if you want, within the Israeli state. For the Zionist, and on the other hand, the way for the Zionist state to pretend that it is not an apartheid state and that it is even a democratic state, they in every discussion about apartheid, they will bring you stories of those 48 Palestinians and tell you, you see. They are here and there. They are in this university. They are in this position. I mean, they are, since the founding of the state, they were kept as a token of the so-called the democratic pretense of the Israeli state that was expressed in its declaration of so-called Declaration of Independence in 1948. If I'm not clear, I haven't been clear, please tell me. I will try to clarify.
Okay. Yeah, clear enough. Now, we thought we had our third speaker, but now it seems we don't.
He was here for a second. He might have dropped out again, but maybe we'll take a question in the meantime then.
Okay.
I believe he has joined, so
oh, okay.
Adnan, if you are here, would you like to turn on your camera?
Oh yes, he is here in the guest list. Yes. Yeah, so
hello everyone. Sorry, I'm in the street. I'm just rushing back to my office. So hopefully I will be able to join you in a few minutes.
Okay. So
okay. Yeah,
that's great.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
No worries. Yeah.
Good. Okay. I'll take another question. Les, do you have any particular question?
Yes. Well, one person asked a long list of questions, including historical parallels to apartheid South Africa and the capacity of the Palestinians to mount effective resistance and destabilize the colonial settler regime there by comparison with South Africa.
Would you like me to address that?
Yes.
South Africa, the anti-apartheid struggle is really a kind of an inspiration for us. Obviously, it's a very different kind of a situation, and there's no one-to-one correspondence. But there are some. I mean, there's a lot of things to talk about. I'll just mention one thing in terms of the resistance, and that is that in a sense, sometimes you get even Palestinians that say, well, the one-state solution that we're proposing could never happen because the Israelis would never allow it, or the international community would never allow it because, Israel is Israel, it's a legitimate state and so on. But in some ways, it's of course the Israelis wouldn't allow it. Why would they? In an apartheid situation, they're the privileged population. They have all the resources, they have the sovereignty, they have the international recognition, they have the wealth. So why would they want to dismantle that apartheid situation? But in many ways, that's very similar to what the ANC faced. Whereas the whites in South Africa were also in that position. So the ANC, in my view, I'm simplifying, obviously, but what the ANC did was they bypassed the white population in South Africa. I mean, there were whites that were part of the ANC, of course, but the vast majority were opposed to ending apartheid. And as a matter of fact, they saw the end of apartheid as a bloodbath. That was their term for it. And so the ANC went not to governments, because it was the same situation. Governments were against the ANC, like today. Reagan called Mandela a terrorist. But it went to us. It went to the international civil society, to intellectuals, to political activists, to labor unions, to churches, and so on. And all of us of a certain age were a part of the anti-apartheid struggle. And, a lot of other things were happening. The end of the Soviet Union, there was a military resistance from inside. I mean, it's not the same thing, but the mobilization of the international community played a key role in the final collapse of the apartheid regime in South Africa. It became unsustainable. When not only the sports boycotts, of course, to isolate South Africa, but when Ford moved out of South Africa, the Ford Motor Company, when corporations, this is BDS, when corporations did not want to be soiled by an association with South Africa and apartheid regime, that was the beginning of the end. And because the whites in South Africa saw in the Freedom Charter of 1955 and in the Constitution, the draft Constitution before the end of apartheid, that they had a place in the new South Africa. The end of apartheid was not against them. That Mandela used to say, we're all South Africans. They were able to go along with the transition to a democratic regime. That, I think, is very similar to here in many ways. The Israelis will not be a partner. We have to go abroad. We have to mobilize the international community. The big difference is that the ANC always had an end game, which was one person, one vote. We all knew what the demand was to end apartheid. We don't have that with the Palestinians. Some want 2 states, 1 state. There's all kinds of confusion. There isn't a unified voice or a strong voice, and that's our fatal flaw. And that's the fatal flaw that we're trying to address today with this one democratic state program. But we think that if we have that in place, then we can mobilize all of you abroad, and we believe we can replicate what the ANC did in South Africa and bring about the collapse of the apartheid regime in Israel.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Sorry, Les.
And I think we now have Adnan in a quiet place rather than en route.
That's great.
Are you ready now?
Yeah, give me a couple of seconds just to get ready. Just set up on my computer. Yeah, carry on, Jeff. I enjoy listening to Jeff. Carry on.
Oh, well,
I just need to set up on my PC,
Okay.
on my laptop, so I can speak and see you better. Okay, just a few
Okay.
seconds.
Okay.
Shall we take another question in the meantime?
Yes.
So we've got a question here about a two-state solution. So if a two-state solution is to be rejected, how would a single-state solution be brought about, given the opposition to it among both Jewish Israelis and Palestinians? Would it be through military destruction of Israel or constitutional reform within Israel itself? What would happen to the Jewish population if Palestinian refugees were granted the right to return? And can there be a single democratic state while Hamas and Hezbollah exists as potential political actors?
Yeah, just add, because it's such a long question, if you want to read it, it's about the fourth one from the top, because it's a lot to follow if you're just listening.
Gilbert, you want to respond?
Well, yes, thank you. I don't think that, I mean, and Jeff did not mean that we should oppose the two-state solution in the sense of what the PLO or whichever section of the Palestinians may have in mind. What we are clear, both Jeff and myself, in rejecting is the Bantustan, is this the actual so-called Palestinian state that is put on the table, which is even less, as I tried to say, even less than a Bantustan. If you look at the South African Bantustans, they had even more sovereignty than the PA. So, mind you, something of a revitalized, to borrow Joe Biden's term, revitalized PA means even more subservient PA than the one headed by Mahmoud Abbas. So now you have had a consensus of Palestinian forces in 2006, which was called the prisoners document, in which all factions or fractions of the Palestinian movement, that is not only PLO but including Hamas, agreed on a set of minimal demands that may constitute the basis in their mind of an independent state, which would be total withdrawal of the Israeli army from all territories occupied in 1967, full dismantlement of all the settlements that were created in those territories, in the West Bank, that is, dismantlement of the wall, return of the refugees. So, I mean, this set of demands is definitely not something any of us, or at least I'm here sure that Jeff would join me. No one of us can oppose this, and so that's not what is being discussed. What we definitely oppose is to call what I mean, what Washington has in mind, to call this a state and to call this a solution of the Palestinian question. That's just wrong. That's a plain deception, and that is a liquidation, an attempt at liquidating the Palestinian cause, which has no chance of succeeding, because no, I mean, at least the very large majority of the Palestinians can't buy anything like this. They will be, and even if any segment of them had any illusions, like we had in Oslo. After Oslo, you had a lot of illusions about what was going on, but very soon people realized that they had been duped, that this whole thing was not at all conducive to what they had in mind as a project of so-called independent Palestinian state.
Hey, Professor Halpert, do you want to come in on that too?
There's a lot to say, but let's bring Adnan in.
Okay.
You can hear me now, see me? Hi, Christine.
Yes. Yes. And if you turn on the camera, we can see you.
I don't know how.
But it's
Camera is on. I can see myself, but I don't know why I can't.
okay.
See. Let's see this one.
But it's not essential. But maybe Christina could just read out the biographical note, and then.
The camera is the third button on your right on top.
Yeah, then share.
Yeah, let me read out the bio then in the meantime. So we've got Adnan Sabah here, who's a Palestinian solicitor practicing law in the UK, specializing in civil and administrative and human rights law. He is a legal researcher and writer of legal analysis on Palestinian issues, also a political and rights activist and media commentator on Palestinian affairs. He is a UK coordinator of the One State Democratic State campaign. Very welcome to you, Adnan Sabah.
Thank you very much. I am honestly, I'm sorry, I'm having this difficulty joining. Try maybe now. Try if you can see me. If you can. We've let people in the meeting know you're waiting. Maybe it's not me. I hope I didn't go to another meeting. Now, which one shall I disconnect? I seem to have two connections.
Oh, yeah, I think you're in the meeting twice now. So you need to shut down one.
Now you can.
We can hear you, Adnan, so it's all right if you want to.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Perfect. There you are. Great.
Oh, you can see me now. Oh my goodness.
Good to see you.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Sorry for the delay. It was just, you know, a conflict, and it came last notice. Anyway,
okay.
I know. Thank you very much for the invite, and I know Jeff and I have been, you know, in know of each other and each other's ideas for some time. So I know where he stands on this discussion, and I'm pleased to see to meet Gilbert also. And I can see from what I quote from his talk is maybe there is no differences in there's much differences in the idea about the solution or the problems that we are facing in the Middle East. So maybe we share all share the same ideas, but maybe in a different ways. Anyway, thank you all for inviting me, and I'm pleased to be here with you. I don't think there is much I can add by way of intellectual context, if you like, or content to the discussion, which most observers, people of all walks of life, know, to be developing which has been developing in the Middle East for, the past few months that brought it forced it on the people to watch it and consider and think about it and know exactly and ask questions, know what is going on and why and how things develop. One of the issues that you all know that came to the surface in the beginning, that as if history stood still and it started on 7th of October. And we had extreme difficulty to push back on that narrative and tell people that no, it hasn't started on history, hasn't started on the 7th of October, and there is much more history behind that date, leading up to that date, and which had to be taken into context. Now, where that falls with our discussion is, it's like deja vu. You know, every time there is a war and there is a new cycle of violence or fighting or whatever in the Middle East, we come together and scratch our heads and think, "Oh, what's the solution?" The solution has been always what we always thought should be a one state equal, one state solution. Sorry, one state solution for everyone to live free in the same space of land for everybody. It's not that difficult to understand, and it's not that difficult to to fathom after 75 years of fighting and bloodshed. And every single, almost a laboratory, every single proposed solution or tried solution, I don't need to recount it, from Nakba to exile to genocide to everything, has failed. Every single solution has failed, whether it is proposed by the Arabs or by the Zionists. I don't want to say the Jews. Although, by the way, you forgive me, in the context in Palestine, we are used to saying Jews as normal, representing Israel vis-a-vis the Arab. So it's normal. But when we come outside Palestine, we cannot comfortably use that term, if you like. So what is left for us now? After 40 years of trying the two-state solution and the Oslo proposals and all which I call con, and I call it con, and it is a con. It is a very serious con on the Palestinian people, perpetrated on the Palestinian people, orchestrated by Palestinians on the Palestinian people. It's a con, absolute con. Now, they tried it. After 40 years, everybody on the 6th up to the 6th of October, every single person that you can think of on word screen, word media, politics, military analysts, everybody, media, we're talking about the two-state solution is dead. Oslo is dead. And suddenly, after the 7th of October, everybody around the world, they want to revive the dead. I mean, I know we in the East, we are used to these mysticism of reviving the dead or living the souls of the dead. And now everybody wants to revive the dead. It is dead. Nothing having to change its prospects for life, a sustainable life after 7th of October. That wasn't there before 6th of October. And it's not on the Palestinian side, by the way. It's always been on the Israeli side. And that is why I call it a con, because the Palestinians knew all along, the leadership of the PLO, when they decided to abandon the one-state solution they proposed in the 70s, they didn't have something in return. The whole Oslo farce was a recognition of the Palestinians by the state of Israel and the right to exist for the state of Israel and the Jewish in return for the state of Israel recognizing the PLO as leader or legitimate leader of the Palestinian people. They didn't recognize a state in opposite in return for recognizing a state, like it was, they always the preferred plan for since the United Nations decision of partition of Palestine until 1993, which was when they signed the Oslo Agreement. It was a state vis-a-vis state, an Arab state and Jewish state. So where is the recognition of the Arab state? There was none. And the Palestinian leadership knew there was no recognition of a Palestinian state. And yet they still went ahead and they agreed to engage in the Oslo process, which led us to the conclusion that we are in today. Now, in Ramallah and in Gaza, it's not different. It is no different. Last night I was watching the news, following the news, the settlement, which is on the land of Bitunia next to Ramallah, is doing exactly the same like the Israeli army doing in Gaza. Assaults and you name it. I don't want to go into the details. So the two-state solution is still in, I don't know how to describe it, in the head of Mr. Abbas or Mr. Biden. Netanyahu said it clear. He made it clear now. He had the courage to say it since September last year. That's it. There is no two-state solution. Don't be eluded. Don't be, don't even talk about it. And he put it in front of the weight of the at the altar of the United Nations. This is the state of Israel. From the river to the sea is Israel. So that's one state solution. Now, I don't want to add much. Everybody knows the narrative of the discussion. Last night I was talking to myself, and I was saying to myself, if we can, resolve this conundrum, which is more important, more holy, the land or the man or the land, I think it may help us to decide what type of one state solution we want. Now, Jeff said that we, on the Arab side, proposed this. On the Israeli side, it was refused. Now it is going to be more difficult to persuade the Israelis to accept or even to think about one state solution. Forget about this hike in adrenaline, poisonous adrenaline that happened after 7th of October. Even before 7th of October, Jeff and I, we were talking, many people like here in London and in back home and in the West Bank, we're talking about it. The same difficulty we have. How do you persuade those people who are in the privilege to forego some of their privileges for us, the underprivileged, who are now seen to be only fit to be slaves or dead? Now, what I was saying is the conundrum between man and land, which is more holy, which is more important. Because some Palestinians say, no way we can talk, even consider living side by side with the Israelis, based on the one-state solution. No, we want to liberate Palestine from the river to the sea, and then we will decide what to do. We are saying, no, let's decide now what we want to do after we liberate Palestine. First of all, we have to liberate Palestine. How do we liberate Palestine? And this was, for the last few weeks, there was this difficulty here in London, onslaught on us. They wanted to criminalize anybody saying from the river to the sea. They wanted to criminalize raising the Palestinian flag. They wanted to, anyway. So from the river to the sea, an Arab and Jew, an Arab and a Palestinian, an Arab, Christian, Muslim, Druze, a Jew, and Israeli Jew, and there are, by the way, there are Jews who are Arabs, and they declare themselves as such, can live together. Is it going to be a state of Palestine, or is it going to be a state of Israel? If we put both proposals to the state of Israel, now we tell them, we Arabs, we the Palestinian people, agree to live in a one-state solution under Israeli government, which is under a state which is called Israel, from the river to the sea. What do you think their response would be? Everybody living in equal in one state, democratic state. Call it Israel. They wouldn't. Two-state solution. You take out simply remove the settlement. West Bank and Gaza become an independent state, and the rest is Israel. They wouldn't accept that. Never. And they said that. I'm not making up whatever anything that I'm saying or I'm advocating or I'm thinking about. So what are we left with? The only thing we are left with is exactly the only thing that we started with: to liberate the land, liberate the people. We don't have to give concessions to anybody, Arabs or Palestinians. We have to go exactly full force. on the same narrative that we, the one-state solution, proposed in the first place, like South African solution. South Africa, as everybody knows, they didn't raise arms to fight apartheid, but they did it. How did they make it? We have lessons to learn, and I think we don't have to give concessions again, or be, how shall I say, shy of proposing anything that we believe that it is the right solution, because history is going to judge us on our actions now, for both people, for both the Jews and the Arabs, the Israelis, the Zionists and non-Zionists, and everybody. What we can do is exactly what we need to do. We have to mobilize, and we have to be vocal even more, and we have to be felt and seen on the world scene even more. NGOs, groups, parties, religious groups, whatever. And we have to push for this narrative or this solution that we are calling for. We have no other option. Governments are not going to volunteer. Western governments are not going to volunteer a solution. The United States is not going to ask for a solution or push for a solution. A month ago, what they said, and I still remember the word in my mind. The Speaker of the Secretary of State, he said, the proposal for two-state solution, the best proposal or best option is to put both parties on a path to two-state solution. A path, remember this word, a path. We want to put the Palestinians and the Israelis on a roadmap. You remember roadmap of George W. Bush. And then you, Palestinians and Arabs, decide what you want to do. Meaning, we know the result. We've been there 40 years ago. A path. They don't say, the United States of America, the British government, the European government, they have one sentence, one magic sentence they can say. They recognize a Palestinian state. They can recognize a Palestinian state, and they will show their true face if they are really committed to a two-state solution. I don't think they would do it.
Adnan, with apologies, because I can see some people are leaving now, but that's fascinating, and thank you so much for giving us your account as well. And just to acknowledge as well that we are now 1 minute past finishing time, so apologies for keeping you. Please do feel free to stay on for another 4 or 5 minutes or so. We can take one more question. But we just did want to acknowledge as well that it seems that some people may not have been able to post in the Q&A. So apologies for that. It seems that there may have been a Teams update that might have prevented some people from actually posting a question. So we do apologize for that. And we also recognize that there are many excellent questions here in the chat. So we're having a very difficult time actually choosing which ones to put forth, but please do come to our next webinars as well, so that we will address the broader themes here that have been posted. I don't know if you want to take one final question, Les, if you want to choose that one.
Yes, I mean, before Adnan was able to join us, Jaf mentioned that, of course, Palestinians are divided among themselves about what would be a credible solution, and that many still hold on to the idea of somehow creating an independent Palestinian state. And one of the questions asks about the Palestinian citizens of Israel. What is their view, or perhaps their diverse views, and likewise within those who have no citizenship in the West Bank and Gaza, what are their diverse views? And more specifically, which kinds of organizations have joined the coalition to try to persuade other Palestinians that they should support the one democratic state?
Should I address that?
Well, or Adnan. I mean,
okay, maybe Adnan should, since it's about
that. I think so. Yes, that's why I left the question till now.
More than me, but anyway. Yes, thank you, Jeff. Sorry, Leslie. the difficulty that we are, it's true that we are divided, and you know, to be honest with you, I do admit and accept that the problem starts with us. The solution to the problem starts with us, because we, the Palestinian people, who through the all, you know, historically the leadership who proposed the one-state solution, they abandoned it, and they just didn't offer anything like a Palestinian, I mean, original organic Palestinian offer or proposal for the solution. They didn't put anything in response. So what happened after that? The official leadership of the PLO started, you know, shifting towards the two-state solution, you know, the 242 resolution, etc. And then they started not only, you know, forgetting or abandoning the one-state solution proposal, they started suppressing people who oppose the official stance of the official leadership. The factions of the PLO or the parties in the PLO, they are almost in, how shall I say, disarray politically, and I mean, organizationally also, they don't seem to be occupying their space that they should be occupying, and coming up with kind of solutions or engage in political discussions to change the narrative of the official leadership. The factions outside, who are the more prominent, like Hamas and Jihad, Islamic Jihad and others, who are not part of the PLO, and they are not part of the official leadership, and they have no say in it, have gone their own ways. Even Hamas decided to change their in 2017, and they changed their constitution to accept the two-state solution. Now I don't know what they will offer. I don't know what there are discussions, but their position in relation to the solution has to be revisited and explored again. The NGOs on the Palestinian side are completely in disarray, because most of them are either attached to a faction, a political faction, PLO, PFLP, etc., or they are financed by a European outside state. So there is, on the Palestinian side, there is a complete fragmentation of a, if I can call it a front or a political front, to be able to propose something of a solution. We were discussing this sometime a month ago, and we are still discussing it, and we have to revisit it, and we have started some kind of, you know, intellectual contacts, if you like, conversations, to be able to formulate something like a coherent body that would, you know, put a proposal for a one-state solution, either a one-state solution or I don't know what, because difficulty now, as I said, because of the high timbers on both sides, is difficult to engage in a reasonable and rational and cool and you know, calm conversation with either side. So I think, yes, on our side, I think the Palestinian leadership has accepted, they have admitted, accepted, whether they say it or not, that they are politically bankrupt. They have nothing to offer, they have nothing to say, they have nothing to do. And this is the conversation that we have to have on the Palestinian side, what we Palestinians should do to be able to exercise and exert our position on the world scene and a solution.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Shall we finish here, because we've already gone over? Is that okay, Les? Yeah. Okay, well, in that case, we'd just like to thank all of our brilliant 3 speakers for their contributions. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you here. And thank you so much to all of the participants who have come today to listen to this, and for your questions. We do apologize that we haven't been able to address some of them, but thank you, and please do continue to come to our webinar so that we can keep discussing these things. Thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Shukran jazilan.